Good evening. Thank you all for coming for our January Family Academy. We're very appreciative for all those who are here in person and to those watching live stream. We want to say thank you to our family resource tables who are here to support our families. Special thank you to Family Services, Catholic Charities, and Source Hub, all of which are here with resources to help you. I just want you all to know that we also have caregiver affidavits available with notaries free of charge if anybody would like to take part in filling those out for your families. Our presenter tonight is MITA, Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition. Thank you so much for coming. It's always an honor to have our community partners here to educate our families. Welcome.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay. My name is Jessica. I work at MIRA, and I'm an immigration lawyer. I've been an immigration lawyer for about 18 years. So I come to you with a lot of knowledge that I hope to share. I first want to talk a little bit about our organization. MIRA has been around for a long time, and we are an advocacy organization. So we work to try and change the laws, to try and change the policies, to make the life of all immigrants and refugees and the lives of everyone in Massachusetts better. We also provide free legal help with citizenship. So if you already have a green card and you want to take that final step to become a U.S. citizen, we can help you for free. I've been asked to come here tonight to talk to you about your rights when it comes to having contact with immigration. I want to say very clearly that these rights belong to all of us, regardless of the immigration or citizenship status that we have. And that's important, so I'm going to say it again later. But I first want to provide some information about what immigration is. When we talk about immigration, there are 3 different federal agencies. You might probably already know about all of them. The first one is ICE. This is the immigration police. When you hear about immigration agents going to someone's home, being detained, that's usually ICE officers. We also have a second type of immigration police called CBP. They're the immigration police at the border. But not just the southern border, or the border with Canada, they're in charge of 100 miles all the way, all around the United States. So a lot of Massachusetts is within 100 miles of the ocean, of our coast. So CBP has power there too. And then we have U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. They're not an immigration police. They review applications. You might send them an application for a work permit. You might send them an application for TPS. You might send them an application for a green card, for asylum, for citizenship. That is the agency that reviews all the applications. All 3 agencies fall under a big agency called the Department of Homeland Security. So, a question that I often get is, how does immigration find people it wants to deport? The number one way that people come into contact with immigration enforcement is either at the border or at the airport, or if they have some contact with the criminal system. Because when someone is arrested, even if you're never convicted, just when you're arrested, you're fingerprinted. And those fingerprints are sent to immigration. And that's how immigration becomes aware of someone. There's other ways too. They can specifically decide they want to pick someone up who they know has overstayed a visa or something like that. We may also see bigger enforcement actions, like immigration going to a workplace and asking all of the workers for papers. But we have not seen that yet. We have not seen that during the Trump administration so far, but it could happen. I think most people know that you can be deported if you don't have any immigration status in the United States. But even people with immigration status can be vulnerable to deportation, usually if you have a criminal conviction. But there's lots of other complicated reasons under immigration law as well. There's a lot of words here. But I wanted to tell you about a new policy that just came out on Friday. The new policy says if you've been in the country for less than 2 years and you did not enter legally, that immigration could try to quickly deport you without going in front of an immigration judge. Normally, if immigration wants to deport you, they have to put you in immigration court, you see a judge, you can explain why you think you should not be deported, and you have a process. This new rule allows for a faster process, but only for people that have been here less than 2 years and did not enter legally. So if you have been here for more than 2 years, it's a good idea to carry some documents with you that you could show an officer, if you need to show and prove that you've been here for at least 2 years. If you have not been here for 2 years, if you have any kind of immigration status or pending application, it's good to carry evidence of that. If you are in immigration court already, it's good to carry evidence of that, to kind of show them that you already have a process pending. So I want to talk to you now about what your rights are. If an immigration officer comes to your home, or stops you when you're driving, or stops you in a public place or at work. Again, I want to remind everyone that under our Constitution in the United States, everyone who is present in the United States has some basic rights. And everything that I'm going to talk about today are the rights of everyone here. Citizens, non-citizens, people with status, people without status, people that have been here a long time, or people that have just arrived. We all have the rights that I'm going to be talking about tonight. I also want to acknowledge that sometimes people don't feel safe affirming those rights. They say, okay, I know what my rights are, but I'm afraid that if I stand up for my rights, maybe they will become violent or things will become worse. And it's true. Sometimes that does happen. So I'm not here to tell you that you must behave in this way if you have contact with immigration enforcement. But I am here to tell you what your rights are, because it's only after you know your rights that you can make an informed decision about when to exercise them, when to assert your rights. So if you only remember one thing from tonight, I want you to remember this tool. This is a Know Your Rights card. Do we have any available tonight? Yes, we do. Okay. These cards are available for you here tonight. So some of you already took one. I see it. Great. If you didn't get it, get one before you leave tonight. These cards are really important because on one side, in your language, they remind you what your rights are. It's all good to be here and talk about what our rights are, right? But in the moment, that someone knocks on your door or stops you on the street, that can be very stressful, and it can be hard to remember what the right thing to do or say is. So this card reminds you of your rights. And then on the other side, in English, it tells the officer, and you can show the officer, and it tells them, I want to exercise my rights under the Constitution. I want to remain silent, I don't want to answer your questions, and I want to call a lawyer, okay? Sometimes you don't have the right words to tell the officer that, or maybe you don't have the right words in English, or maybe it's just difficult to make yourself heard. So having the card is a really excellent tool. You can carry one in your wallet. Even if you're a US citizen, you can put one in your wallet. I gave one to all my children. You can keep one in your car, and you can keep one by the front door of your house. So no matter where you are, you can have easy access to this important information. So let's talk about some of these scenarios. I'm going to talk about what happens if immigration comes to your house, if you're stopped when driving, or if you're stopped in public. And even though we expect more immigration enforcement under the Trump administration, I also want to say that the chances you will be stopped are really small, right? There's only so many immigration officers. So what happens if immigration comes to your house and they knock? What do you do? Usually, when people knock on the door, we open the door, right? We live in safe neighborhoods, and many of us just open the door. But it's important to remember that you should not open the door. Keep the door closed and instead ask, who is it? Immigration sometimes doesn't tell you it's immigration. Sometimes immigration will say that they're the police, or they might lie and say something else, right? If they say they're the police, you can ask them, oh, what police department? What is your badge number? But you still don't open the door. The only time you have to open the door is if they have a piece of paper called a warrant that has been signed by a judge. Usually immigration does not have that. They might have other pieces of paper, but they usually don't have a warrant signed by a judge. And I'll show you some examples in a little bit. Instead, you can ask them, do you have a warrant? If they say yes, you still don't open the door. You say, show me, right? Put it under the door, hold it up to the peephole, or hold it up to the window of the house so that I can see it. And then you give them the Know Your Rights card under the door, right? Say, here, I'm asserting my rights to remain silent. And then you call someone. You call your lawyer, you call a community organization that might be able to help you. You call someone who's a US citizen who's not going to be at risk. So how do you know if they have a piece of paper that means you have to open the door? The only piece of paper that means you have to open the door is a warrant that has been signed by a judge. So this is a piece of paper that a judge has signed, giving them the power to enter your home, or to arrest someone, or to search your home. And so, it's a formal document, but you really just want to look for the word judge, right? Where it's signed at the bottom, has it been signed by a judge or by someone else? And that's important because immigration often has a piece of paper, and they call that piece of paper also a warrant. But it's not a warrant that has been signed by a judge. So here on the left, you see an example of a warrant signed by a judge. And you know it's a warrant signed by a judge because it was given by the court. It has the name of the court at the top. And at the bottom, under the signature, it says judge. The other piece of paper on the right is what immigration usually has. And they also call it a warrant, but it's not a document issued by the court. At the top, it says Department of Homeland Security, so not a court. And it's not signed by a judge, it's signed by an immigration officer. The document on the right, the one that is by the Department of Homeland Security and signed by an immigration officer, has no power. It does not mean you have to open the door. You can keep your door closed and say, I don't want to speak with you. I see many people are taking pictures of the slides. I want you to know that these slides are available on our website, and they're available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. So you can go to our website and look at the slides in your own language. Okay, so that's what to do with immigration or the police come to your home. Keep the door closed, ask them for a warrant, only open the door if they have a warrant that has been signed by a judge. The next scenario I want to talk about is what happens if you're stopped when driving. So before I talk about that, I want to talk about driver's licenses. In Massachusetts, we now have driver's licenses available to everyone that lives in Massachusetts if you can prove your identity. It doesn't matter what kind of immigration status you have or if you have no immigration status at all. If you live in Massachusetts and you can prove who you are and you can pass the driver's license test, you can get a driver's license. But usually, what you get first is something called a permit. And when you have the permit, you're not allowed to drive by yourself, even if you've been driving for 20 years, right, in your own country. With a permit, you need to have another person in the car sitting next to you who's at least 21 years old and who has had a license for at least 1 year. So you need another experienced driver. What we have seen is that a lot of people get their permit and then they drive without an experienced driver. And so if you're stopped because you were going over the speed limit or you didn't stop at a stop sign and you only have a permit and you don't have an experienced driver in your car, that's considered driving without a license. And that can get you in trouble and it can get you flagged for immigration too. So if you recently got a Massachusetts permit, please take that final step to make it a full license so that this doesn't happen to you. So let's say you have your license and you are driving and you are stopped. Maybe you're stopped by the police, maybe you're stopped by immigration, by CBP. In Massachusetts, when you're the driver, you have to give them your name and your address. Of course, if you have a license, you can give them your license. If they ask for the car registration or proof of insurance, and you have those things, you can give that to them. You do not have to answer any questions about where you're from, about whether you have immigration status, about how long you've lived here. The only information you have to provide is your name and your address. If there are passengers in the car, let's say someone is sitting next to me, the passenger doesn't have to provide any information, not even their name, unless they're receiving a ticket, right? So if I'm stopped because I'm speeding, I have to give my name and my address. And if the person sitting next to me is not wearing a seatbelt and the police wants to give them a ticket, then they also have to provide their name so they can give them the ticket. But if they're not getting a ticket, they don't have to give any information at all. Instead, the passenger can simply say, am I free to go? Am I free to go? And when the officer says yes, you can get out of the car and calmly walk away. If you're on the highway, you can't get out of your car, right? But on any other road, if you say, am I free to go? And they say yes, you can walk away. You also don't have to consent to a search of your car. They can only search your car if you give them permission or if they have probable cause to believe you've been involved in a crime. And lastly, and very importantly, never give any law enforcement officer any fake documents. In fact, the best advice I can give you is to not carry any fake documents or documents that belong to somebody else on your person at any time. They will always figure out that they're false. And then the last scenario is what happens if you're stopped in public, if you're just walking down the street or if you're in a public space and the police or immigration stop you. I have been asked this question many times. The question is, what is the police or what is immigration allowed to ask me? Any guesses? What can immigration or the police ask you? People are shocked. Okay. The answer is, they can ask you anything. They can ask you your name, they can ask you your favorite color, they can ask you what you had for dinner last night. That's not the important part. The important part is, what do you have an obligation to answer? And the answer is, you don't have to answer any questions at all. So if I'm stopped by a law enforcement officer and they ask to see my papers, I will simply say, am I under arrest or am I free to go? Because if I'm not under arrest, then I'm free to go. And I will slowly walk away, right? Now, I will say that if you're an adult, and most of you are, if you're 18 or older, and you have some type of immigration status, the law says that you should carry proof of that status. So if you have a work permit, if you have a green card, then you're supposed to carry proof of those documents. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to show it right away. You can always ask, if you feel safe, you can always ask, am I free to go? Am I being arrested or am I free to go? And usually you're not being arrested because they don't have any evidence. So they have to say that you're free to go. If you're not free to go, when you're first interacting with them, you should always know that you have the right to remain silent and to speak to a lawyer. And so if you practice one sentence in English, that sentence should be, I have the right to remain silent, I want to call a lawyer, right? If you're not able to say that, you can at least say, I want to be silent. I want to be silent. So, what are some things that you can do now just to feel like you're prepared, right? One thing is to know your rights. And we have talked about them, and so now you know what many of your rights are. Another thing you can do now is to memorize phone numbers. All of our phone numbers and all of our information is on our phone, and many times people don't memorize important phone numbers, like the phone number of their children, of their partner, of their lawyer. But it's really important to spend some time just memorizing phone numbers, because if you are detained by immigration, they might only let you call one person. And so you want to know, who should I call in this moment? And you want to know their phone number, because you're not going to have access to your cell phone if you're being detained. And then think in advance about someone, ideally a U.S. citizen, or someone that has really secure immigration status, that can come and maybe pay bond to allow you to come out of immigration detention, if that is the situation that you're in. So I want to share a little bit of information about immigration detention. most people, even most people who are in the deportation process, will never be detained, right? But sometimes people are detained. And so I want you to know that if that happens, you should not sign any documents, because you might be signing for something called voluntary departure, agree to leave the country. You should continue to remain silent and not provide any information. And you don't want to rely on what the immigration officers are telling you your rights are, because they might not be telling you the truth. If someone you know has been detained by immigration, there is a website where you can go and put in their name and their date of birth and their country of origin, and it will tell you if they're being detained and where they're being detained. But there's often a delay of about a day, several hours to a day after someone is detained before it will show up in the online system. If someone is detained by immigration, many people are able to request bond. Bond is money that you pay to be able to get out of detention and continue going to immigration court outside of detention. At the end, if you win your case, they give you the bond money back. Or if you lose your case, they give you the money back after you leave the United States. Okay. The next topic I want to talk about is thinking about making plans for your family. If a parent or a caregiver is detained by immigration or is deported, but also if something else happens, if they're really ill or become unavailable for other reasons, you want to think about making plans for your family. I want to begin by first saying that when a parent is detained, or even after they're deported, they continue to be the parent of that child, even if they're separated. So you still have all the rights of a parent, and you still have all the rights to make decisions about your children's lives, and to participate in any court proceedings about your children, if there are any. So making decisions about what could happen to your children if you're not available is a really hard topic. And to help you through that, there's a booklet that has been put together. It's available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, and I think Arabic. And it provides you with lots of information, much more than what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Before talking about some of the options for taking care of your children, I want to share with you some basic tips of things that you can do now if you haven't done them already. The first thing is, if you have children, and I think most of you do because you're here, you should make sure that someone is authorized to pick them up from school if you're not available to pick them up. So check with the school to make sure that they have the right information on file about who is authorized to pick up your children. You also want to check with the school what personal information about you and your children can be shared. Sometimes schools put together directories that include all the addresses of the families, and if it's in a directory, sometimes that information can be shared with other entities, including immigration. So maybe someone from the school can speak to that at the end, but you just want to check. If your children have been born here in the United States, you might want to register their birth with your country of origin, with the consulate of your country of origin, so that they know that you have children. Those children are probably citizens of both countries, and you also want to make sure that your children have passports. A U.S. passport if they were born here, and another passport if they're also dual citizen or if they were not born here. And then lastly, you want to think about, is there someone that you would allow to travel with your children if the worst happens and you have to leave the United States and you want your children to be reunited with you? giving them permission to travel with a trusted adult is important. All of these things, or some of these things you can do, like getting a passport and doing a travel letter, you can do after, right? But it's much more complicated. So it's better to do it in advance, just in case. You will probably never need it, but just in case. So then the big topic of if I'm not available, who is going to take care of my children? And I have here 4 different options. The first option is what we call informal. Informal means I call my sister and I tell her, hey Stacy, you know, if something happens to me, will you take care of my children? And she says, of course, right? That's just informal. It's great, but it doesn't mean that a judge or, you know, the child welfare system has to follow that. So one step up from that, and probably most people's best option, is something called a caregiver authorization affidavit. And it was announced at the beginning that you have affidavits available tonight, and you can get help filling these out if you want to. So what the caregiver authorization affidavit does is it allows you as a parent to choose another adult to be the one who can make decisions for your children about their education and about their health care for a period of up to 2 years. Now, you don't give them that power instead of you, right? You keep all of your rights as a parent, but you're also giving someone else the ability to make those decisions if you're not available. A caregiver authorization affidavit requires you to sign it and to have 2 witnesses, 2 other adults sign it, and it has to be notarized. So they can help you with that tonight. There's another step up called a temporary agent authorization, which is similar, but it also gives the person the ability to make decisions around finances, so money-related things, but it's only good for 60 days. And then the very last option is guardianship. Guardianship requires you to go into court and someone is appointed as the legal guardian of your children and exercises all the rights of a parent instead of the parent. So you're giving your parental rights to someone else for a certain amount of time. That option requires going to court and is often not the best option for people. So usually the caregiver authorization affidavit or the temporary agent authorization are the best options. A couple final tips before I talk about where to get legal services and good information. So make sure that you have all of your important immigration documents somewhere together. Sometimes people are really good about organizing your documents, and sometimes they're not. And so if something happens, and you're, let's say, detained by immigration, and someone calls a lawyer, the lawyer will say, okay, what is their situation? Show me their documents. And if you don't know where to find those in your house, then that can be really stressful. So organize any important documents, not just immigration documents, but also things like birth certificates, passports, important medical records, and vaccination records. It's always helpful to have them all organized. Some documents also have very important information on them, like your A number, which is your identity number in immigration records. And some documents might have information about the date of the next court hearing or an appointment that is coming up. And it's really important to know about those. I'm going to skip these slides. Okay, I'm going to talk about where to get legal help. And then I've lost track of time, but I hope I'm good on time. 6:41. Okay. Thank you. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions. So getting legal help is really important, and it's really hard. So some of you may have already connected with a lawyer or legal services and have gotten advice, but maybe some of you haven't been able to do so yet. It's important to try and get a consultation with a lawyer now, rather than waiting until something happens, right? It's better to be proactive whenever possible. So first I want to give you information about who is authorized to give you legal advice. So in the United States, there's two categories of people that can give you legal advice about immigration. One is lawyers, a lawyer or an attorney that went to law school and has a license to practice law. And then the other is something called an accredited representative. Now, an accredited representative is not just a person that decides to do immigration. An accredited representative is someone that is working with a nonprofit organization, and the organization and the individual have gone through a special application process to show the government that they have the knowledge and the experience to give people legal advice when it comes to immigration, even though they're not lawyers. How do you know if someone is an accredited representative? Well, there's a list online, and you can simply look at the list and see if their name is on it, if their organization is on it. This is really important because there are lots of people out there in the community. Some of them that are really trying to help people, and then some of them that are just really trying to make some money off of you. That are giving legal advice, that are helping people with immigration forms and applications, but they're not authorized to do so. Even the people that are well-meaning, that want to try to help, can cause a lot of hurt. So I've seen many cases in my 18 years as an immigration lawyer where someone got in trouble because they got advice from someone who should not be giving them advice. So I encourage you all, before you allow someone to help you with your immigration case, to ask them, are you a lawyer? Are you an accredited representative? And if they say yes, it's okay to say, prove it to me, right? Show me where your name is on the list. Show me your legal license, right? If they're offended by that, that's a red flag, right? There's something wrong. And if they can't prove to you that they're a lawyer or an accredited representative, they should not be giving you legal advice. So if you have gotten services from someone that should not have been helping people in immigration cases, there are ways to report it. If you feel that you've been the victim of fraud, if you feel that you have been misled by someone making you believe that they were authorized to give you legal advice when they were not. And so on this slide, there's information about different offices that you can call to make a complaint and to make a report. So where do you get real and free or low-cost legal services? As I said in the beginning, there's not enough free lawyers, right? But the free and low-cost lawyers that we have are working really, really, really hard to try and help as many people as possible. The best listing of free and low-cost immigration legal services is on this website called the Massachusetts Legal Resource Finder, masslrf.org. You go to the website, you say that you live in Massachusetts, you answer a few questions. The information is not kept. It's not shared with anyone. You answer a few questions, multiple choice, you give them your zip code, and then it will give you a list of organizations that provide immigration legal services. And then you have to call. You have to call each organization and request an appointment, sometimes be on a wait list to be able to talk to someone and see if you can meet with someone knowledgeable who can tell you what your options are if you have options. I've included a couple of other resources here. One is a listing for people that are in immigration court. And then the last one is for legal services outside of Massachusetts. We are all here in Massachusetts, but many of you may have family members or friends that live in other states. And so the last one here is a national directory. And then finally, and then I'll stop and take some questions. If you scan this QR code, it will bring you to our website where we have all of our Know Your Rights information, all of the information that I shared tonight. There's also one-page handouts that remind you what your rights are, copies of the Know Your Rights cards, the family preparedness packets, about making plans for your children, more information about what your rights are when you're at work, and lots of other resources. So I encourage you all to go and check out all the resources that we have here. So I believe that's the last slide. So I have more information that I could share, but I would like to pause here and see if there are questions. Don't be shy.
Earlier, when we were talking about having a passport for our sons and stuff, and then we were mentioning about the caregivers, there's somebody that we trust in the position to do that. In case we don't have the documents ready, passports and all that for our sons to do that, where we are, the person that we gave authorization to make decisions for our children, would they be able to make them?
So the question is, what if I, am forced to leave the country and I want my children to be able to come to my country of origin, but they don't have passports yet? Can the caregiver, where you fill out the caregiver authorization affidavit, can they get the passport? And the answer is usually no. The rules around, at least for US passports, I don't know the rules for other countries, but for US passports, it has to be the parent, or in the absence of the parent, it would have to be a guardian appointed by the court. So that's why it's a good idea to get that started and get the passports in advance. It's always a good idea to have passports. You never know when you might need to travel.
E no caso de pessoas que já têm o caso arquivado, tem que ter alguma atitude ou tem algum problema com a migração também?
So the question is, if I had an immigration case, but the immigration case has been closed, okay. Do you mean an immigration court case? What kind of- So the question is, well, what if I had a case, but the case has been closed? Could I still have problems with immigration? It's difficult to answer that question because it depends on the type of case and why it was closed and how long ago and if you have any other status. So I just want to say that, I'm not going to be able to answer questions that are specific to your situation. I can only answer general questions. So I can talk to you briefly afterwards if you want. There was a question here.
Eu gostaria de saber se, supostamente, se eu for deportada, eu tenho uma filha e ela está na escola. Eu vou deixar esse documento com uma pessoa que vai estar assim. Como eu posso dizer? Essa pessoa ela tem que ter um green card para ela enviar a minha filha para mim, no Brasil, no caso. Ou essa pessoa pode somente entregar a minha filha para a imigração para ela ser deportada junto comigo.
So for those of you that don't speak Portuguese or we're not sitting right next to her with the translation, the question is, well, what happens if I'm deported and my child is in school? If I fill out the caregiver authorization form, does the person that I give these rights to, do they need to have a green card? And could they make arrangements for my daughter to be deported with me or to be sent back to my country as well? So first of all, I want to say the ideal situation is when you complete the caregiver authorization form, that the person you choose is someone that has secure immigration status. Because otherwise, then what happens if that person is subject to immigration enforcement? Then you don't have a backup. Oh, we're blocking. So when you fill out the caregiver authorization form, it is better to choose someone that is a citizen or has a green card or has some other kind of good immigration status. Now, the second question about whether, well, if I'm deported, can my child be deported with me? If your child is a U.S. citizen, they cannot be deported. So it depends on how you are deported. If you are forced to leave and you're given a date by which you have to leave, then you can leave however you want, and you can book a plane ticket, and you can book a plane ticket for your child too. If you're in detention and they deport you and they put you on a plane, you're not going to be able to bring your child with you. And that's why writing a travel letter to give someone the ability to accompany your child back to your country is a good idea. Again, the person should be someone who can travel and then be able to return to the United States. So a citizen or someone with immigration status.
Eu gostaria de saber, pelo que eu tenho visto, os primeiros casos de imigração são para quem tem histórico criminal. Mas eu posso, eu que não tenho nenhum histórico criminal, eu posso ser levado também por estar no lugar errado.
So the question is about whether you only have to worry about deportation if you have criminal history. The answer, unfortunately, is that the law allows for people to be deported when they don't have immigration status, even when they don't have criminal history. So if you don't have immigration status, but you are a law-abiding person, you pay your taxes, you work hard, you don't have any criminal history, it is still possible under the law to deport you. That said, usually immigration goes after people that have criminal history because it's easier to find them that way, because they're usually somewhere in the criminal process, but not only. And it is possible that if they come somewhere to detain someone that has a criminal record, and you're also right there, it is possible that you could also be detained or put in deportation proceedings. Sometimes it is easier for people to win a case in immigration court if they've been here for a long time and they don't have criminal history, but not always. Immigration law is very complicated. So the bottom line is that yes, generally individuals that have criminal history are more at risk, but other people unfortunately are also vulnerable.
Por um acaso, eu não tenho uma pessoa para poder dar esse documento para ficar com a minha filha e os meus filhos na escola, né? Que eles vão para a escola, eles saem para trabalhar. E, como o rapaz mesmo disse ali, se eu estou no lugar errado, sou presa, como que eu faço para poder pegar os meus filhos para se levantar junto comigo?
Okay, so the question is, what if I don't have anyone that can take care of my children in my absence? And I am detained, how can I make arrangements for those children to stay with me, right? So if your children are US citizens, if they were born here, they cannot be deported. I would say if you are an only parent or a single parent or an only caregiver of your children, if you're being detained by immigration, it's usually a good idea to tell them, like, hey, I have 2 children and they're going to come home to no one. Sometimes that will mean that immigration decides not to detain you. They might still put you in the deportation process, but not detain you. Other times they might still detain you, but at least they will notify social services so your children are not left alone. You have the right to make arrangements for your children, even if you're in immigration detention. But logistically, it can be difficult to make those arrangements. Sometimes if the parent is detained and the children don't have anyone else to care for them, they do end up in foster care. But sometimes the fact that they don't have anyone else to take care of them means that immigration will decide not to detain the parent.
Olá, gostaria de agradecer a presença da senhora. No meu caso, entrei nos Estados Unidos de forma legal, mas até ainda não obtive o meu green card. Então, gostaria de perguntar quanto tempo leva para obter o green card a partir do momento que já foi pago e se no caso ainda não me enviaram o green card, também o que devemos fazer e se também corremos o risco de sermos deportados ou algo.
So the question is about how long does it take to get a green card after you apply? And the answer, unfortunately, it depends. Because there's lots of different ways to get a green card. You could get a green card after you were given asylum. You could get a green card through a family member. You could get a green card through special visas for victims of domestic violence. And so every process has a different amount of time to wait. Sometimes it's 6-9 months. Sometimes it's 8 years. So it really depends, and without knowing more about your process, I can't really tell you. Just one more. Oh, sorry. The other question was, am I at risk of being deported if I have an application pending? Usually the answer is that if you have a process that is ongoing, you have the right to remain in the United States until a decision is made on your process. There are some exceptions, but certainly if you have a pending application, that gives you a better claim to be able to stay until a decision is made. Okay, last question.
Boa noite. Eu queria fazer duas perguntas. Quanto à questão da declaração, eu tenho 3 filhos. Um com 19 anos, com 16 e com 5. Caso eu venha nesse período, no der errado, não der errado, o meu questão é difícil, leva fora do estado. Se os 19 anos, eu posso deixar uma declaração para ele estar viajando. Todos nós temos essa conformidade brasileira. E se os 19 anos, eu posso deixar uma declaração para ele estar viajando com os menores. E isso. E a outra pergunta seria o seguinte: caso eu seja pego, né, em universidade, eu tenho o direito de pedir a questão da fiança na minha situação?
Okay, so 2 questions, very different questions. One question is, if I have a child who's already an adult, 18 or older, and then I have younger children, can I give my older child the ability to travel with the younger children? And the answer generally is yes. If they're an adult, then you can give them that ability. That child that is an adult cannot get passports for their brothers and sisters. You as the parents have to get the passports. But generally, I would imagine they would be able to travel together. And then the second question is, if I'm just here and I have, I don't have status, or I overstayed my visa and I'm detained, am I eligible for bond? The rules around bond are complicated, which is a theme of immigration law. But usually, if you're in deportation because you have overstayed a visa, or you're just out of status, most people, and you don't have criminal history, most people are eligible for bond. Bond can be anywhere from $1,500 to $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 or more. And again, bond doesn't buy you status, it just buys you the ability to continue your process outside of detention. So a 19-year-old, adult child you can do a caregiver authorization affidavit for the 19-year-old. But if the 19-year-old is not a U.S. citizen or doesn't have immigration status, that's not the best option. Or you might also want to do one for someone that has lawful status. Okay. All right. I think that was the last question, so I don't know, should I hand it off to someone? I'll go if someone hasn't asked a question.
Hi there. A minha questão é, existem muitos casos de pessoas que vieram pela fronteira, pessoas que vieram com visto de ou estudante ou turista. Estão todos exatamente na mesma questão ou existe alguma coisa que certas pessoas entram sem ser identificadas e algumas entraram identificadas? Exato. É a mesma coisa?
In one way, it's the same thing because both groups are public. So, sorry, the question was about, the question was about, is there a difference between people that may have come into the country illegally or people that came on a tourist or student visa and then stayed? So, in one way, they're similar because both people are subject to deportation for not having immigration status now. In another way, they're a little bit different. People that came in on a visa, immigration knows that you're here. They might not know where you are, but they probably know that you're here. If you came in illegally and you've had no interaction with immigration, you were not caught, you never filed an application, they might not know that you're here. So they could still find you, but then, they're not actively looking for you. However, people that came in through the border without a visa could be, and have been here less than 2 years, could be subject to that quick deportation process that I talked about at the beginning. Whereas people that entered legally with a visa are always going to have the right to go to immigration court and see a judge. Okay. So that was the last one. I know there's many more questions, but I'm told that's the last question.
Thank you so much for your hospitality, for all our families. I just want to remind everybody, we do have a family resource page on our Fall River Public Schools website where a lot of this information is posted. As we receive new information from any community partners or the state, we are posting it on there so it's up to date. If you have a hard time finding it, please reach out to the community facilitator at your school. All of our schools have one, and we are continuously meeting with them, training them, and sending them all this information so that they have it. So please don't hesitate to do that. We can also be reached at the Parent Center at 367 Ray Street in Fall River. And this whole presentation will be put up on our website and sent through our Parent Square information app. So if you don't have that, make sure that you download that because we send a lot of great information that way. We're posted on YouTube, so you can also put closed captioning up to translate into your language. And one more thing, Jessica.
One more thing. There's a lot of bad information that is flying around with social media. A lot of rumors, a lot of information that is wrong. So an important thing that you can do is know where to go for good, accurate information. One place for that is Mira's Instagram account. When there's changes in immigration law and policy, we put up a policy update in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. So please follow so that you have a place where you know the information you're getting is true and real.
Once again, thank you all for coming, and those watching at home, thank you very much. Have a good night.